What happens when the roar of the crowd fades and the stage lights go dark? For these 20 heavy metal icons, their final curtain call came far too soon and in the most unexpected ways. One lost his life in a disaster that should never have happened, while another story ended because of a simple twist of fate. 1. Cliff Burton, Metallica. Let's start with a story that sent a shockwave through the entire music world, a moment that changed the biggest metal band on the planet forever. We're talking about Cliff Burton, the legendary bass player for Metallica. You see, in the mid-1980s, Metallica was on a mission to take over the world. Their album Master of Puppets had just been released, and it was a game changer. It was fast, it was heavy, and it was complex. A huge part of that revolutionary sound was Cliff's bass playing. He wasn't just a bass player who hung back in the rhythm section. Truth be told, he was a lead instrument. He played his bass like a lead guitar, using distortion and wah pedals to create sounds no one had ever heard before. He was the musical soul of the band, the guy who brought a classical music sensibility to their thrash metal fury. His head-banging stage presence, with his long hair flying everywhere, was iconic. He was, to put it mildly, a force of nature. In September of 1986, Metallica was on tour in Europe, and their star was rising faster than anyone could have imagined. They were traveling through Sweden on a tour bus heading to their next show. The thing is, tour buses can be uncomfortable, and the bunks were not exactly first class. That night, the band members drew cards to decide who would get to pick the best bunk. Cliff drew the ace of spades and chose the coziest spot. It was a simple game of chance that would have devastating consequences. In the early hours of the morning, while everyone was asleep, the bus driver lost control on an icy patch of road. The bus skidded violently and flipped over onto its side. Cliff was thrown through the window, and the massive bus landed on top of him. The bandmates who survived scrambled out in a daze, horrified by what they saw. It was a freak accident, a moment of terrible luck that stole one of the brightest talents in metal. He was only 24 years old. The loss of Cliff Burton was a wound that Metallica and its fans have carried ever since. He wasn't just a band member. He was a brother and a musical genius whose influence is still heard today. A random card game decided his fate. But for our next legend, his end came not on an icy road, but in the clear blue sky, in a small plane that should never have taken off. 2. Randy Rhoads, Ozzy Osbourne. It's hard to talk about legendary guitarists without mentioning the name Randy Rhoads. In a very short amount of time, this guy completely changed the game. After making a name for himself with the band Quiet Riot, Randy joined up with Ozzy Osbourne for his first solo project after leaving Black Sabbath. What he did on those first two Ozzy albums, Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, was nothing short of revolutionary. You might be wondering what made him so special. Well, he blended the heavy, dark riffs of metal with the precision and theory of classical music. He made songs like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley instant classics with solos that were both technically brilliant and incredibly melodic. He was a quiet, humble guy off stage, but with a guitar in his hands, he was a giant. He was just getting started, and everyone knew he was destined to become one of the all-time greats. In March of 1982, the band was on tour in Florida. They had stopped for the day at a place called the Flying Baron Estates, which had a small airstrip and some private planes. The band's bus driver, who also had a pilot's license, decided to take a few people up for a joyride in a small, single-engine plane. Randy Rhoads, who had a fear of flying, was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed to go up so he could get some aerial photos. What happened next was a nightmare. The pilot, in a reckless attempt to be funny, started flying dangerously low to the ground, trying to buzz the tour bus where other members of the crew were sleeping. On one of the low passes, the plane's wing clipped the top of the bus. the plane spiraled out of control, crashed into a nearby house, and burst into flames. Randy Rhoads was gone in an instant. He was only 25 years old. The world of rock was robbed of a genius, a true innovator, whose work still inspires guitarists to this day. It was a senseless and completely avoidable tragedy that left a massive hole in the heart of heavy metal. That was a joyride that turned into a nightmare. But for our next star, the tragedy didn't happen by accident. It happened on stage, in the middle of a show, and it was an act of pure evil. 3. Dimebag Darrell, Pantera, Damage Plan. There are some guitarists who just have a sound that is 100% their own. Dimebag Darrell was one of those guys. As the lead guitarist for the band Pantera, he pretty much invented a whole new style of metal in the 1990s. It's often overlooked just how much he changed things. His guitar tone was like a buzzsaw, and his riffs were heavy, groovy, and totally unique. He played with a swagger and a joy that was contagious. He was known for his big smile, his signature pink beard, and his friendly, larger-than-life personality. He made every fan feel like a friend. After Pantera broke up, he and his brother, Vinnie Paul, started a new band called Damage Plan. They were just trying to get back to doing what they loved, playing loud and heavy music for the fans. On the night of December 8, 2004, Damage Plan was playing a show at a small club in Columbus, Ohio. It was just a few songs into their set. The band was rocking, and the crowd was loving it. Suddenly, a disturbed man climbed onto the stage and began firing a weapon. His target was Dimebag Darrell. The scene was pure chaos and horror. The man took Dimebag's life right there on stage, in front of his brother, his bandmates, and a room full of horrified fans. Several other people were also hurt or lost their lives trying to stop the attacker before he was finally taken down by a police officer. Dimebag was only 38 years old. The news sent a tidal wave of grief through the metal community. It was more than just the loss of a great musician. It was the loss of a true rock and roll spirit. What's more, it was an attack on the very idea of a concert as a safe place for musicians and fans to come together. The music world became a little less fun and a lot more scary on that terrible night. Dimebag was taken in an act of violence that is still hard to comprehend. But for our next legend, the end came not from a single sudden event, but from a relentless and incredibly fast-moving illness that even he didn't see coming. 4. Lemmy Kilmister, Motorhead. If you were going to build a mountain dedicated to rock and roll, the face carved into that mountain would be Lemmy Kilmister. For over 40 years, Lemmy was the heart and soul of the band Motorhead. He was the gravelly-voiced, hard-living embodiment of everything rock and roll was supposed to be. His bass playing was unique, playing it more like a rhythm guitar, and his stage presence was iconic. He would stand there, head tilted up to the microphone, with his signature mutton chops and military-style hat. Motorhead's music was loud, fast, and raw. Songs like Ace of Spades are more than just songs. They are anthems. Lemmy was considered indestructible. He lived a life of excess that would have stopped most people decades earlier. He seemed like he would live forever. Truth be told, even Lemmy couldn't outrun time. In the last couple of years of his life, his health started to decline. He had to cancel some shows, which was something that was almost unheard of for him. But he always bounced back, getting back on stage as soon as he could. Then, in late 2015, just a couple of days after his 70th birthday, he found out he had an extremely aggressive form of cancer. The doctors told him he only had a few months to live. What's crazy to think about is that he passed away just 2 days after getting that diagnosis. It was that fast. The news of his passing was a gut punch to the entire music world. It felt like the end of an era. The man who was the very definition of rock and roll was gone. Without Lemmy, there could be no Motorhead, and the band disbanded immediately. His legacy is immeasurable. He was an original, a true rebel who lived his life on his own terms right up to the very end. Lemmy's battle was shockingly short. For another legendary voice in metal, the fight was longer and more public, a battle against a silent enemy that ultimately claimed a king. 5. Ronnie James Dio. Dio, Black Sabbath, Rainbow. In the world of heavy metal, there are great singers, and then there is Ronnie James Dio. His voice was simply one of the most powerful and iconic instruments in the history of the genre. You might be wondering what made him so special. It was his incredible range, his dramatic delivery, and his fantasy-based lyrics about rainbows, dragons, and demons. He fronted some of the biggest bands in history, including Rainbow, Black Sabbath after Ozzy left, and his own massively successful solo band, Dio. He is also widely credited with popularizing the devil horns hand gesture, a symbol that is now universal among rock and metal fans. He was, to put it mildly, a true legend. He was a small man with a colossal voice, and he was beloved by fans and fellow musicians for his kindness and professionalism. In 2009, Dio was diagnosed with stomach cancer. Being the fighter that he was, he faced the illness head-on. He underwent treatment and remained optimistic, vowing to get back on stage and perform for his fans. The entire metal community rallied around him, hoping and praying for his recovery. For a while, it seemed like he might just beat it. He was a man who had slayed lyrical dragons his whole career, and everyone believed he could slay this real-life one too. But the illness was relentless. In May of 2010, he passed away at the age of 67. The outpouring of grief was immense. Tributes poured in from every corner of the music world. Losing Ronnie James Dio felt like losing the voice of heavy metal itself. His music and his influence are eternal, and his soaring vocals will continue to inspire singers for generations to come. He was a true master of his craft, and his loss left a void that can never be filled. Dio's powerful voice was silenced by a terrible disease. Our next story is about another metal icon, a powerhouse drummer who passed away from a condition that was just as silent and sudden. 6. Vinnie Paul. Pantera, Damage Plan, Hell Yeah. When you talk about the band Pantera, you have to talk about the Abbott brothers. We already discussed the tragic story of guitarist Dimebag Darrell. The other half of that powerful duo was his older brother, Vinnie Paul, the band's drummer. Vinnie's drumming was the engine that drove Pantera's aggressive, groovy sound. He wasn't just a timekeeper. He was a force of nature behind the kit. His powerful, precise, and instantly recognizable style set a new standard for metal drumming in the 90s. What's more, he was the guy who held it all together. After the horrific onstage tragedy that took his brother's life, Vinnie was left to carry on their musical legacy. It was a burden that is impossible to imagine. He eventually found the strength to get back behind the drums, forming the band Hell Yeah, and continuing to make music and tour the world. He was a beloved figure in the metal scene, known for his friendly personality and his love for his fans. The thing is, even though he seemed to be doing well on the outside, the weight of what happened to his brother never truly left him. Then, in June of 2018, the metal world was shocked once again. Vinnie Paul was found to have passed away in his sleep at his home in Las Vegas. He was only 54 years old. Everyone was left asking, what happened? The official report revealed that he had passed away from a major heart condition. It was a silent and sudden end for a man whose life was defined by loud and powerful music. Many believe that he passed away from a broken heart, having never fully recovered from the loss of his younger brother. His passing marked the end of an era. With both of the Abbott brothers gone, the chance of any kind of Pantera reunion was gone forever. The two brothers who had changed the face of metal together were now reunited, leaving behind a legacy of music that is as powerful and influential as ever. Vinnie Paul's heart gave out long after his spirit was tested. For our next guitar hero, his final battle began with something as small and seemingly innocent as a spider bite. 7. Jeff Hanneman, Slayer. Just the name itself sounds heavy. For decades, they were one of the big four of thrash metal, known for their blistering speed, aggressive themes, and chaotic guitar solos. A huge part of that signature sound came from guitarist and songwriter Jeff Hanneman. He wrote or co-wrote some of the band's most iconic songs, like Angel of Death and Raining Blood. His songwriting and his wild, atonal guitar solos were the perfect chaotic counterpart to fellow guitarist Kerry King's more structured style. He was the punk rock heart of Slayer, bringing a different kind of raw energy to their music. For fans of extreme metal, Jeff was a true god. It's often overlooked that his troubles began in a very strange way. In early 2011, he was bitten by a spider. It sounds like a minor thing, but it wasn't. The bite caused a severe infection in his arm, a rare flesh-eating condition. He was lucky to have survived it all. He had to undergo multiple surgeries and skin grafts, and it left his arm severely damaged. He was forced to step away from the band to focus on his recovery. Everyone hoped he would eventually make a full recovery and rejoin Slayer on stage. He even made a surprise appearance with the band for a couple of songs at a show in April 2011, and the fans went absolutely wild. It seemed like he was on the road back. But truth be told, the spider bite and his long recovery process took a heavy toll on his health. The time away from his passion, the band, was also incredibly difficult for him. In May of 2013, the news broke that Jeff Hanneman had passed away at the age of 49. The cause was liver failure, a condition that was made worse by the health issues that all started with that single spider bite. It was a tragic and bizarre end for a true legend of thrash metal. A tiny spider led to a giant loss for the metal world. Our next story is about another founding member of a massive band, a bass player whose personal struggles became his final losing battle. 8. Paul Gray, Slipknot. In the late 1990s, a band from Iowa wearing masks and jumpsuits took the metal world by storm. That band was Slipknot, and their sound was a chaotic, aggressive, and utterly new brand of metal. With 9 members, including 2 percussionists and a DJ, they created a wall of sound that was unlike anything else. At the heart of that chaos was the band's bass player and one of its main songwriters, Paul Gray, known to fans as Number 2. It's crazy to think about, but while the band's image was wild and scary, Paul was known as one of the kindest and most down-to-earth members. He was a musical anchor, writing many of the band's most memorable riffs and songs. He was the calm in the middle of the storm, a true creative force. But behind the mask, Paul was fighting a serious battle. He had long struggled with his own personal demons, a fight that was largely hidden from the public eye. His bandmates were aware of his struggles and did their best to support him, but it was a difficult and ongoing fight. Then, in May of 2010, the unthinkable happened. Paul Gray was found in a hotel room in Iowa. He had lost his long battle. He was only 38 years old. The members of Slipknot, who were rarely ever seen without their masks, held a press conference unmasked, their faces full of grief, to pay tribute to their fallen brother. It was a powerful and heartbreaking moment. The loss of Paul Gray was a devastating blow to the band and its millions of fans. They had lost not just their bass player, but a founding member and a key creative voice. They eventually found the strength to continue, but the music world lost a truly talented and gentle soul. Paul Gray lost a long and hidden battle. His former bandmate, another founding member of Slipknot, would also pass away years later, his end coming after a different kind of health struggle. 9. Joey Jordison, Slipknot. If Paul Gray was the musical anchor of Slipknot, then Joey Jordison was the high-speed engine. Known as Number One, Joey was the band's original drummer, and his playing was simply breathtaking. You might be wondering what made him stand out. It was his incredible speed, precision, and endurance. He was a machine behind the drum kit. His blast beats and complex rhythms were a defining feature of Slipknot's early sound. He wasn't just a drummer, he was also a talented songwriter, contributing to many of the band's biggest hits. He was a small guy who played with a ferocity that was almost superhuman. For a generation of young drummers, Joey Jordison was the ultimate inspiration. In 2013, fans were shocked when it was announced that Joey was no longer in Slipknot. At the time, the reasons were unclear, and there were a lot of rumors. It wasn't until later that Joey revealed the truth. He had been diagnosed with a rare neurological condition called transverse myelitis. This condition affected his nervous system and, tragically, took away his ability to play the drums. It's crazy to think about a master of his craft having his greatest tool taken away from him. But Joey was a fighter. He went through intense physical therapy and eventually was able to play the drums again, forming new bands and continuing to make music. It was an inspiring comeback story, but the damage from the condition had taken its toll on his body. In July of 2021, the world learned that Joey Jordison had passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 46 years old. Even though he was no longer in Slipknot, his impact on the band and on metal drumming is undeniable. He was a true innovator, a creative genius whose furious drumming will echo for eternity. Joey's battle with a rare disease was inspiring, but ultimately tragic. Our next musician also fought a long battle with illness, a pioneer of a whole new genre of metal whose life was cut short by a relentless foe. 10. Chuck Schuldiner, Death. There are musicians who play a genre, and then there are musicians who invent a genre. Chuck Schuldiner, pronounced Schuldiner, was one of the inventors. As the singer, guitarist, and main creative force behind the band Death, Chuck is widely known as the father of death metal. What most people don't realize is that he took a raw, aggressive sound and constantly pushed it into new territory. With each album, the music of Death became more complex, more melodic, and more technical. He wasn't just screaming about dark themes. His lyrics explored philosophy, society, and the human condition. He was a true visionary who was always looking forward, never content to repeat himself. In 1999, at the height of his creative powers, Chuck was diagnosed with a rare form of brain cancer. It was a devastating blow. The metal community, which he had helped to build, immediately rallied around him. Fundraisers and benefit concerts were organized to help pay for his expensive medical treatments. For a while, it seemed like the treatments were working. He underwent surgery and was on the road to recovery. He even started working on new music for his other project, a more progressive metal band called Control Denied. But the cancer was stubborn. It returned, and his health began to decline again. He fought with incredible courage and dignity, but in December of 2001, Chuck Schuldiner lost his battle. He was only 34 years old. His passing was a massive loss. The world was robbed of a musician who was always pushing the boundaries of what heavy metal could be. His work with Death continues to influence countless bands, and his legacy as a pioneer is set in stone. Chuck's fight with cancer was a public and valiant one. For our next icon, a giant of a man with a deep, unmistakable voice, his end came as a sudden and shocking surprise to everyone. 11. Peter Steele, Type O Negative. In the world of Gothic metal, there was no one quite like Peter Steele. As the frontman for the band Type O Negative, he was an imposing figure. He stood at a towering 6 feet 8 inches tall, with long black hair and a deep, booming bass baritone voice that was instantly recognizable. Their music was a unique blend of heavy, doomy riffs, romantic and dark lyrics, and a healthy dose of self-deprecating humor. Peter Steele was a master of sarcasm and wit, often playing up his vampiric image with a wink and a smile. Songs like Black Number One and Christian Woman made them one of the most unique and popular metal bands of the 90s. Truth be told, underneath the tough and funny exterior, Peter was a complex and sensitive person who dealt with his own personal struggles throughout his life. He was very open about his battles with stage fright and the pressures of fame. In 2005, a rumor even circulated that he had passed away after a picture of a tombstone with his name on it appeared on the band's website. It turned out to be a joke, a classic example of his dark humor. But 5 years later, the joke became a tragic reality. In April of 2010, Peter Steele passed away suddenly. He was 48 years old. The cause was heart failure. The news was a complete shock to his fans and the music community. He had seemed to be in a good place, sober and excited about working on a new album. His passing meant the end of Type O Negative, as the other members rightly decided they could not continue without their iconic frontman. The world lost a truly one-of-a-kind artist, a gentle giant whose music was as dark and beautiful as he was. Peter Steele's passing was a sudden shock, but for another iconic voice from the 90s, his final chapter was a long, slow fade, a retreat from the world that ended in a lonely and heartbreaking discovery. 12. Lane Staley, Alice in Chains. During the early 1990s, the music scene was turned on its head by the grunge movement coming out of Seattle. While not strictly heavy metal, bands like Alice in Chains had a dark, heavy sound that appealed to metalheads everywhere. The voice of that sound was Lane Staley. His powerful, haunting, and totally unique vocals, often harmonized with guitarist Jerry Cantrell, created a sound that was full of pain and beauty. He was a captivating frontman, but he was also a deeply troubled soul. The band's lyrics often dealt with dark subjects, and it became clear that these weren't just stories. They were reflections of Lane's own life. It's often overlooked that Lane's battle with his personal demons was a long and public one. As the 90s went on, his health visibly declined. The band stopped touring because he was no longer able to perform. He became more and more reclusive, rarely leaving his Seattle apartment. His friends and bandmates tried to help him, but he pushed them away, sinking deeper into his own private world of sadness. For years, he was like a ghost, a legendary voice that had fallen silent. Then, in April of 2002, the tragic news finally came. Lane Staley was found in his apartment. He had been gone for about 2 weeks before his body was discovered. He was only 34 years old. It was a sad and lonely end for a singer whose voice had connected with millions. His story is a cautionary tale about the dark side of fame and the devastating toll of personal struggles. Lane's retreat from the world ended in tragedy. Another powerful voice from that same Seattle scene would also be lost years later, his end coming as a complete shock that no one saw coming. 13. Chris Cornell, Soundgarden. Chris Cornell was, to put it mildly, one of the greatest rock vocalists of his generation. As the frontman for Soundgarden, he was a key architect of the Seattle grunge sound. You might be wondering what set him apart. It was his incredible 4-octave vocal range. He could go from a soulful melody to a powerful high-pitched scream in the blink of an eye. Soundgarden's music was heavy, complex, and intelligent. Later, with the supergroup Audioslave and in his solo career, he continued to showcase his amazing talent as both a singer and a songwriter. In the years before his passing, he seemed to be doing great. Soundgarden had reunited, he was touring, and he was known as a dedicated family man. That's what made what happened next so shocking and heartbreaking. In May of 2017, after playing a sold-out Soundgarden show in Detroit, Chris Cornell was found in his hotel room. He had made the choice to end his own life. He was 52 years old. The news was a devastating shock to his family, friends, and fans. No one saw it coming. He had just finished a powerful performance hours earlier. His passing shined a bright light on the fact that inner battles are often invisible. Someone can seem to have it all, a successful career and a loving family, but still be fighting a deep and silent war within themselves. The loss of Chris Cornell's voice was a loss for all of music. He was a true poet and a vocal powerhouse whose music will continue to move people for a long, long time. Chris Cornell's passing was a shock that left the world asking why. Just a couple of months later, another icon, a singer who had been close friends with Chris, would also make the same heartbreaking choice. 14. Chester Bennington, Linkin Park. For a generation of fans who grew up in the early 2000s, Linkin Park was more than just a band. They were the voice of a feeling. Their blend of heavy metal, hip-hop, and electronic music, a style known as nu metal, was a massive global phenomenon. The emotional core of that sound was the voice of Chester Bennington. He was capable of both beautiful, melodic singing and some of the most intense and cathartic screams in modern music. He was the raw nerve of the band, and his lyrics, which often dealt with feelings of pain, anger, and frustration, connected deeply with millions of young people around the world. What many people didn't realize was that Chester's lyrics were coming from a place of real, deep-seated pain. He had a very difficult childhood and had struggled with his mental health for most of his life. He was very open about his battles in interviews, hoping to help others who were going through similar things. He was known as a kind, funny, and energetic person off stage, but the inner darkness was always there. He was very close friends with Chris Cornell, and he was devastated by his passing. In July of 2017, on what would have been Chris Cornell's 53rd birthday, Chester Bennington also chose to leave this world. He was 41 years old. The back-to-back losses of these two incredible vocalists was a brutal blow to the rock community. It was a tragic reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of mental health. Chester's voice may be silent, but his music continues to be a source of comfort and strength for millions. Strength for millions. Strength for millions.